welcome to Raging Romantics. My name is Jackie.
I'm Jen!
And this is Fabio, and we are Raging Romantics in every sense of the word.
We are happy to be brought to you by Northern Onondaga Public Library, where both of us are employed as librarians for the moment.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah. I do all of the outreach service stuff.
And I am the Adult Services Librarian at North Syracuse. And Fabio is our mascot. Yay! We're here today to start this romance webcast, which will be aired twice a month, every month, until somebody tells us to stop or something else happens.
So this webcast is all about the romance genre. And we will also be discussing everything and anything relating to the genres, the subgenres, categories, kissing cousins, actual kissing cousins. I don't know, we'll see. So pretty much anything that we really want to talk about that we can think of to do with romance novels.
Yes. Without further ado,
Let's rage!
All right, so before we get started, I do want to issue just a general trigger warning, content advisory heads up for all y'all. In case you couldn't guess, we will be talking about romance novels during this webcast. This means we will be having discussions that might not be considered the best for younger listeners, and we will be using language that might be considered inappropriate, improper for some audiences. We will be talking about issues such as intimacy in varying forms and subjects, consent, LGBTQ+ issues, social movements, sex positivity, toxic masculinity, and much, much more. We will always try to issue trigger warnings so that you guys know what's going on and can have a heads up before we get started. Please, if you think that this isn't for you, or if you are turned off by any of our warnings or advisories, then go ahead, move along, totally fine. We'll miss you. Hopefully we'll see you in a future webcast. If you are interested in continuing to listen and watch, then excellent. Awesome sauce. We are happy to have you, and let's roll into it. Jen's already being attacked by a cat. Phoenix, what are you doing? You got scared by Fabio.
Sorry, Phoenix.
Okay. Anyways, back to Raging Romantics. Jen, why are we doing this webcast?
Because I don't have anything else to do. Don't, is this filming?
Yes, it
I was
is.
lying! I've got lots to do! Cut that out.
No, I'm not cutting that. Not at all.
I have so much to do. I'm so busy.
So busy. So very busy at work.
Okay. No, for real, we love romance. We've been big fans of the genre forever. We're both very loud and we talk very fast.
And I think our coworkers are sick of us talking about romance at work.
I've had people start to leave the room when I come in it.
Or their eyes glaze over when you start to rant and you're just like, oh, okay.
So we're hoping to find some people that feel the same way we do, that really love romance.
Yeah, we basically just really want to talk more about romance than we already do. Which, by the way, we run a romance book club. Between the Covers. Ta-da! I don't know if you can read from that far away. But yeah, Fabio's also our mascot for that. So if he looks familiar, that might be why. Hi, Phoenix. How are you, kitty? Be prepared to be distracted by cats a lot. Where was I going?
I don't know what you were doing.
I got lost.
You got distracted by the cat.
Squirrel.
So yeah, we are crazy and we want to rant about it like nobody's business. But I'm also really hoping to start cool discussions about romance, to really dive deep into some of the tropes and topics and the history of it, and just take a deeper dive in general, because sometimes it's very hard to find people to take romance seriously and think of it as more than just fluff or trash or cotton candy.
Smut.
I mean, it is smut.
I love smut.
But there can be value in smut, and I'm hoping we can discuss it, and I hope you guys come along with us and tell us how we're doing, I guess. Call us out when we get wrong.
We have a lot of opinions, guys, and we just really want to talk about them. We have feelings.
Yeah.
And
nobody else cares about our feelings, so we're talking to Jackie's phone instead.
Exactly.
And now we're talking to you.
And the cat. We're talking to the cat. We talk to Fabio a lot. He usually lives in my office, so he's happy to get out and see the world a little bit.
But enough about that.
Right.
If we're such romance lovers, let's prove it. Jackie, how did you get into romance?
I love romance.
How'd you fall in love?
I fell in love. The very first romance book that I picked up I snuck past my mom at a library book sale at Manlius Public Library, shout out. Thank you for feeding the obsession. And I wish I could remember the title, but I think it was called The Sword and the Amulet or something like that. It was a medieval, of course. You'll get to know I'm obsessed with medieval history. I'm a medievalist, so be prepared. And then after that, there was kind of like a lull until I got to maybe like 7th or 8th grade, and then Sherilyn Kenyon happened.
Oh yeah,
Fantasy lover.
We've got a lot to say about Sherilyn.
There's so much to say about her. She's done a lot of stuff. But yeah, so we had like an illicit romance smuggling ring all throughout middle school.
Did?
We would like smuggle paperbacks into Earth Science, and like we'd hide them between our
Did
textbooks.
you have like a black market romance dealership?
Probably. But it was more like a book trade.
And you guys thought librarians were nice.
Right.
Look at us.
We're subversive. We're subversive, guys. But yeah, what about you, Jen?
So my very first romance was when I was procrastinating on a Great Wall diorama in 6th grade. I was not doing my work at my mother's computer, and she had just left this book on the table. It was red. It was very much like the typical half-naked man, so it was very noticeable. Not Fabio, but it was called Fantasy Lover by Sherilyn Kenyon.
Yeah!
And I was obsessed with Greek mythology at the time, and it featured Greek mythology, and it had like this really cool take on it. So I just picked it up because I was bored and it sounded interesting, and I think I probably finished it that night because I just got hooked immediately. I've always been drawn to really like stories that feature women, that are really women-centered, and I found it was hard, I think, when I was growing up because so many had like male protagonists, or like the women were kind of sidelined, or they were stupid.
They were the bodice rippers.
Yeah, so even though this was like, it was very adult.
It was very adult.
It was very adult for lots of reasons, and I wasn't connecting with her so much as that. But I just really loved a story where she was like the hero, and I got hooked real quick. Just from
this was pre-Twilight, so I think it was just so nice to read a book that wasn't Essie Hinton. And
she's great, but like I don't always want to cry about Pony Boy.
Right. I actually hate The Outsiders. Sorry.
It's a good thing this is a romance podcast.
But yeah, no,
These bad opinions podcast.
But I loved Greek mythology too, and so like I honestly think that the illegal romance smuggling ring, we first picked it up because we all loved like Greek mythology. We had just read the Odyssey and the Iliad, and we were very much into like reading anything we could about Greek mythology, and so we naively saw this and we were like, oh, he's a reincarnated god or like something like that from Greek legend. And we were like, oh, this is gonna be good, and then things happen. Things happen. So yeah, it was really nice to start reading something that was very woman-centric and very feministic. Is that a word?
Yeah, we'll go. Whatever. We'll make up a word for you.
Feministic.
I get what you mean.
I'm Shakespeare.
Not all romance is feminist, but a lot of it is. And
And I think also when we were young and started reading, there was such a backlog of books that we could read. Like all of Nora Roberts.
Like I just went through my mother's stack. Yeah, I read that book, and I read that book so many times because I loved it so much. My grandmother actually stole it.
Oh my god.
And she claimed to have lost it, and it wasn't until years later my mother told me she threw it away because she thought I was reading it too much.
Oh, I totally hid my books under the bed. Like, all the way shoved up under the bed, like behind all the shoe boxes. That was where my romance books lived.
No, my mother gave me stuff, which was really cool of her. I think she figured if I didn't want to read it, I just put it down.
That's good.
And in hindsight, I've read all these scary statistics about how young people are now when they start getting into porn or like really...
Sex.
Yeah, and like really... I'm much happier that I've read like Sherilyn Kenyon as opposed to going exploring on my own.
Yeah.
Just as a personal note.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of benefits to romance. I don't know if I should have started that young in hindsight.
Maybe not with Sherilyn Kenyon too.
Yeah,
but...
she's a lot.
So,
but it wasn't that bad. Like there's
No.
definitely like we will discuss books that I could have started with that are a lot worse.
Yeah. So, anyways, we both obviously have a very long history with romance, and this cat is Phoenix. You gotta get down. I'm covered in cat
How many
hair.
romance books do you think you've read?
Well, according to my Goodreads, it's only like 300, but that's not accurate because we talked about this. So Jen and I actually started working together summer 2017.
Oh God, you're good at years.
So yeah, we started working together on the pop-up truck 2017.
I forgot that, so that's
because
real encouraging.
I had longish hair at the time. So anyways.
Sorry, I don't measure your time by your hair.
It's okay.
My hair's gotten way too long. That's all I know.
Hashtag COVID. Yeah, tell me about it. And we started doing like a mini romance book club in the truck because you told me, you turned me on.
Yeah,
to,
I gave you Ruby Dixon.
Yeah, Ruby Dixon.
Blue Librarians!
Blue Aliens. We will talk about them. Have no fear. Blue Aliens are amazing. But Kindle Unlimited.
Yeah.
Like you told me about Kindle Unlimited, and so that's when I started doing it.
My memory sucks.
Anyways.
But even back then, I do remember talking like endlessly about romance with you and like annoying everybody else. So we were finally like, well, let's just like talk about it with like-minded people in a club where other people aren't forced to suffer listening to it.
And Between the Covers started September 2018. We're going on 2 years. If you're interested, it's at Noble, Between the Covers.
We have a lot of fun.
We have fun. We talk about romance books.
When it's not COVID, I bring in chocolate.
Yeah.
But not now, because I don't want to accidentally sicken you guys.
Moving on.
You didn't ask how many books I've read.
How many books have you read?
12! Damn it, what's the number? It's like 1,200. 1,263.
Oh, that's how we got on this discussion.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up, because I wanted to brag
You
that
wanted to
I
brag.
am ridiculous, and I am very well organized when it comes to cataloging books and nothing else.
Yeah. But I didn't list all of the romance books I had read because my boss is on the same Goodreads
Well, you
as
just
us.
take it off the update. I take stuff off all the time.
Yeah.
I know.
There's some things that could be triggering.
You know,
If Fabio is triggering anyone, please let us know.
we'll put a blanket on him.
We'll put a shirt on him. I think I have another shirt around here somewhere.
That'd be cute.
Okay.
Or, you know, if you just want to see him differently, we got a kilt for him.
He does have a kilt, yes. So let us know if Fabio is triggering you, in which case I apologize. We will change it. But anyways.
You have a rather pathetic read count. That's okay. I accept you anyway. But what kind of romance is on that read count?
Anything and everything, almost. I do like to read a little bit of everything, but I lean more towards, now I read a lot of rom-coms, so like modern rom-com sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I also really love anything that's like adventure-based. So I just finished a Colorado Search and Rescue series by Pamela Clare, which was really good, and it made me want to move to Colorado and start like a dog rescue and marry a firefighter or something.
You
know,
can do that
just
here.
the usual thing. We don't have a lot of mountains.
Well, go forest fire a tree.
Because that's legal. I also love cowboys because I grew up riding horses and I still ride horses, and cowboys are my jam. Except for the handlebar mustache. Okay, what kind of romance books do you like to read?
Same thing as you. I really love just about everything if I can get my hands on it. I tend to avoid sci-fi a little bit just because I don't like the tech and the math that sometimes goes with it, unless it's Blue Aliens.
Yeah.
Really, I'm more like, I can't get into Amish. I'm trying. We're gonna do an Amish month eventually, just to
Or like
talk
a
about
clean.
So there's this phenomenon of like clean romance, and I don't like that. I don't really like the adjective. I don't like the implication that there's stuff that is dirty.
Yeah. Okay.
Because clean usually is like there's no sex. There might be limited cursing.
Hand holding.
Yeah, there might be a kiss or two.
There might be a sharing of the bed situation, especially if
even
it's
that's, like,
Amish.
Do they? I don't think they share beds. Do they? Maybe. That stuff I tend to avoid a little bit, and anything that feels like a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
If it's disingenuine, if it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love Kindle smut. I love a lot of tropes. I love a lot of just ridiculous, over-the-top things that I might end up texting Jackie about because it was really funny.
Yeah. Too many texts. This leads us into our next point of we should probably define what a romance novel is.
Yeah, because it's real helpful for us to be like, oh, we read everything, but like, what are we reading? Like, what are we reading, Jackie?
Everything.
Everything. Anything.
Relating to romance. Okay, so the official definition of a romance novel comes from the Romance Writers of America, RWA. There's your first acronym of the day, besides Noble. So it's really the second.
We didn't say
acronym.
Noble, did we?
I thought I said Noble. Anyways, RWA, Romance Writers of America, which is problematic in its own right, but we'll still use
They're
their
fixing
definition.
it, maybe they put
Knock
the
on
fire out.
So, according to RWA, a romance novel is anything that focuses on a relationship between two people.
And I thought it was more. They took the two out.
They did?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Last time I looked, it was two people. So it's
They
a
took it out.
romantic relationship or a relationship between people
Yep.
and has a general happily ever after, HEA, or a
Or happy for
satisfying
now. Like a happy for now.
ending.
Yeah. Or happy for the moment.
Somebody's satisfied.
Somebody.
I can't get no.
And it's really interesting because it's something that's changed a lot over the years. Definitely going back to RWA, they had much stricter definitions in mind. It used to be only it was a man and a woman in marriage.
White, cisgendered,
Yeah.
heteronormative.
All the favorite-ish, which...
We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about the history of romance in a minute. Just using this definition is like not a satisfying definition. So for instance, we have everything from the clean romances, yes, you can use my hand, thank you, all the way up to the Kindle Smut and beyond. And then of course you have Nicholas Sparks.
Yeah, who is not a romance writer. He's
because the dog always dies.
You know, because he according to him, he writes love stories, and it's a very specific difference.
Which aren't love stories romances?
You would think. No, in romance, the woman subjugates the man and tames him, and that doesn't happen in his love stories.
I don't see anything wrong with that. No.
So I think for me, my definition ends up being, it's like an emotional look at a relationship. And for me, it does have to end happily. One of my favorite things about romance is that it does have a happy ending. I know for a lot of people that's formulaic and really boring and stupid. But for me, I get really anxious. So I love that I know what's coming and I can just really enjoy the journey and how they get there.
Yeah.
And then usually with my judge of a good romance novel is if it was interesting and if they got to the ending in a way that was actually believable.
Yes, this is true. I do like a lot of fantasy romance, unlike Jen. So the believability, I'm not too much into. But I mean, I guess if the relationship is believable and
that's good enough.
there's not like consent issues, we'll talk about that. Then I'll like it and I'll read it. And I do agree that I do like some sort of HEA.
Yeah.
Whether
like, what's the point? The real world is depressing enough.
I know. So
just
romance,
give somebody a happy ending.
Romance is so escapist to begin with. I'm gonna have cat hair in my drink.
Yeah.
Romance is such an escapist point of literature to begin with that I think anything that offers that escapism and focuses on relationships between two or more people.
And I think not just the two
aliens.
people, but I think just the internal relationship happens a lot too.
And some form of character growth.
Yeah, like it never ends with the woman feeling like a doormat or disrespected. I think just as much she comes to love, if she hadn't already loved herself or respected herself, that's how it ends too. Which I think is just as much an important part. Because I know there's people that are like, you just want to see women married, and I don't.
No, not
I
at all.
don't actually like marriage in real life. I shouldn't say
We
that.
have issues we need to talk about.
That is for therapy, not for here.
This is therapy. Rude romance, like patriarchy.
So yeah, happy emotional journey with the partner and happy emotional journey with self.
Yeah, I agree.
So happy you agree.
Happy ending.
It's like we went on our own emotional journey.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of like a brief definition of romance. Is it brief? Is it a definition?
I don't know. Let us know if we suck.
No, be nice.
I'm not going to read the comments. You are.
Yeah. Anyways, so basically what we're trying to say is there is such a broad variety of what is considered romance, and it's very like a personal definition.
It's not an easy thing to pigeonhole.
No.
As much as people who don't read romance like to say.
Yeah. This is very true.
Usually you can tell who are the people that have only read the Bodice Rippers and the Harlequins.
Yeah.
Which they have their own value, but there is such a broad spectrum because there's just so much.
Can you define Bodice Ripper really quick for someone?
So Bodice Ripper is...
I don't think they can see it
Flame
from
in the
there.
Flower. You don't want to see it. I honestly hate this book.
So when you think of Bodice Ripper, yes, you can think of Fabio. So a bodice, first off,
It's literally...
it's the upper part.
Oh, I always picture like a corset.
No, so it's not the corset. So it's the upper part of a woman's, and this is very specific, like gendered part of romance. Upper part of her clothing, not including the corset.
Okay.
So yes, it's mostly historical romances that are considered bodice rippers. And they're the covers that you see in the drugstore with like the heroine where her, like swooning into the hero's arms, into Fabio, into Phoenix's arms. And the hero is, his shirt is ripped open or he's completely shirtless and he looks very fierce and he's got very nice pecs and usually hairless and Fabio. And usually there's some kind of like dramatic wind effects going on. That's a bodice ripper.
Well, it's not so much the cover so much as literally like she gets her clothes ripped off and there's a lot of dubcon and there's a lot of rape and a lot of consent issues.
dubcon?
Like dubious consent.
Oh, dubious consent. Okay.
Sorry, another sorry.
I actually didn't know that one.
Dubcon, yeah.
Yes.
A lot of dubious, and usually the woman is kind of like like a weakly, cowardly wallflower type? I mean, the Flower of the Flame actually changed that a little bit. They did give her some agency, saying that very, like, lowest threshold met ever. But there's a lot of issues where they're just kind of taken by this overcome, lustful man who just needs them so badly.
And that is a bodice ripper, which is a very specific form of a romance novel. It is not what all romance novels are. As we said, we have the clean romance, we have bodice rippers, all the way up to what's considered chick lit, which is like my least favorite definition ever. So why do we have to gender fiction literature? First off, that sucks.
I think when I read about it, it was an easy way to sell it.
Yeah, it's a marketing. It's really
more of a marketing thing, and then it's these literary writers who kind of wanted to look down on something. Yeah. Because they needed to keep their
men. Sorry.
They needed to keep their very special literary. I can't think of a word. I'm trying not to be too mean. I'm sorry. It's okay. They're mean though. Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to make themselves feel special, kind of by keeping their very special literary category.
Space.
Yeah. So how did we get here, Jackie? Where did romance start?
History. I love history. I'm a history nerd, so I will try to keep this brief and try not to make your eyes glaze over. The cat's already looking away.
Your eyes are already glazed over.
My watch started talking to me. We'll cut that out. Anyway, so the history of romance as a genre. A lot of people think romance started with the bodice ripper. Spoiler alert, they're wrong. Romance actually traces back all the way to Greco-Roman times, and really it can go back, so it's old AF. And it can even go back further if we're talking about Western literature. We're talking about Greco-Roman, but if we're talking about Eastern literature, so we have Babylonian scrolls, we have Japanese and Chinese poetry, we have the Kama Sutra. Yeah. I mean, there's so much.
Does that count as romance?
Does erotica count as romance?
Oh, good point. All right.
So, I mean, because there's like Shiva the Destroyer.
I just didn't know there was a story with that.
Oh yeah, there's such a thing. Like, anyways, but yeah, so there's a very long tradition of
he's not happy with it though.
Romantic literature going back all the way through the ages. They didn't really call it romance at the time. It would have been just more like sexual relationships. It would have been love stories. Catullus, who wrote in the 1st century BCE up through the 1st century CE, he was a Roman dude. He wrote love poems to his mistress who was married. We don't know if there was a happy ending with that, but his poems certainly made it seem like there were happy endings. So we'll call that romance. In the medieval time, we start seeing the chivalric literature. So we have like the knight who had his lady and he would do anything, like he would rescue her from dragons, the princess in the tower situation. And then moving forward, of course, we have Shakespeare, which Romeo and Juliet is by no means a romance because they both die in the end very stupidly, and they're both teenagers. So
yeah, I'm not a fan.
But we have Midsummer Night's Dream, where literally everybody gets married, everybody's having a good time in the woods.
Yeah. She doesn't end up with the donkey head.
No, he gets turned back into a man.
That's good.
And she ends up with the king of the fairies. King of the fairies? I'm not sure. Anyways, so, ow. That was a claw. They're literally all happy in the end. And then, of course, we have Jane Austen, which, because she's a classic, she's not a romance.
Yeah.
I highly disagree, because they get married in the end. It's a happily ever after. There's, like, a satisfaction. That's not
satisfactory ending.
Satisfactory ending. Like, everything is resolved.
And it really explored her life and her love and her relationship. It wasn't like, I don't know, they didn't, what word am I looking
there
for?
was no sex, sure. That doesn't mean it's not a romance.
Whatever. Yeah, it's enough. I mean,
there's fan fiction now that has a lot of it in there.
Yeah.
But
don't worry, fan fiction fixes everything.
Yeah, fan fiction is great. We'll get to that. We'll get to Kindle again. And the Victorians, there's just so much, like through all points of history, there's everybody writing romance. There's everybody writing about this story for the common man, I guess. Yeah. Romance itself comes from Old French romance, which is Latin romanique, and I can see your eyes starting to glaze over.
No, I'm interested. What's it mean?
It literally means of the common tongue. Oh. So it's anything written in the common tongue.
Okay.
But anyway, so
but it's interesting to me that it meant more of like a common thing as opposed to.
So if you think about literature back in the time, was mostly churchly, at least in Western culture. It wasn't secular.
Yeah, not a lot of people knew how to read either.
Yeah,
so really, you just heard Bible stories.
So after the Crusades, so like 11th through the 13th century, the Crusades brought in all this wealth into Europe, right? And so there was a new rise of, for reasons problematic in its own right. There's this rise of wealth and then upwardly mobile nobility. So like people like Eleanor of Aquitaine and this new kind of court culture, especially in medieval France, they started sponsoring literature that was written Romance in the common tongue. So people like Chaucer came about, and you had, in France especially, there were a lot of scribes who started writing this chivalric literature. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is another really good, and you're laughing at me. Hi guys, inner perfectionist Jackie poking her head through. I just equivocated medieval French literature with Chaucer and Sir Gawain, which is not accurate. I can hear all of my professors yelling at me right now. Sir Gawain and Chaucer were of the British tradition, whereas medieval French is completely different. They're during the same time period, but traditions and court culture were completely different. So in France, you see this kind of rise of the secular literature going through, and you start seeing this non-churchly influence, whereas in the UK, it took a little while for this influence to come across, and you still see a lot of church influence until Chaucer shows up. So Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and Chaucer are not French. Just had to say it so I didn't get in trouble and lose my first master's. Okay, thanks, TED Talk over. But yeah, so romance, the word, it just literally means for the common man, of the common tongue, and it's only once the Gothic literature comes about that we start really coordinating the word romance with love stories.
Okay.
Because the Victorians were very repressed. In case you didn't know that, the Victorians were repressed.
But they were repressed in weird ways, because I've read they've had things like nipple rings and certain things weren't a big deal.
Yeah.
But then, you had to lie back and think of England.
Yeah. And there's a lot of cultural reasons for that, but the premise is pretty much that there was this kind of underground growth of sorry guys, there's a lot of bad innuendo that's going to be had that happened in literature during this time period, and these kind of like the broadsides and like these really tiny original OG paperbacks that were just like Nell with her suitor in the back room.
So does that mean too that when the printing press got around and they started having like these really cheap ways of getting it out?
So the spread of literature could be argued to see a rise in more people reading, more people asking, more people writing. And as demand, as we know, supply equals demand, or
and a lot of people wanted those romance novels.
Exactly.
Which I kind of find pretty encouraging.
Yeah.
Like, we've wanted to read this stuff for a gazillion thousand years, no matter how you guys want to complain about it.
And then in the 1930s, something magical happened called Mills and Boon. Mills and Boon was a UK publishing imprint that partnered with Harlequin imprint in the States, and they started mass publishing these little romance paperbacks. And they were really short, and they started publishing these little tiny paperbacks that were love stories. They were very culturally staid. There was no sex, maybe there was kissing, but there was always a happy ending, pretty much. Like they got married.
It was very they weren't breaking boundaries with any of this stuff. It was very much in time with the times.
Very
in line
much
with
so.
the times. Sorry.
Yeah. Same difference. I'll take it.
I'll
I'll take it. I accept. And then World War II happened. Yeah.
How did that change things?
So because the UK industry was so hard hit by World War II, everything kind of shifted focus to the US. And in the 1950s, Harlequin imprint was pretty much reborn, and it became the largest publisher of romantic literature pretty much in the world. And they still publish today. They're those little purple and red, sometimes blue paperbacks that you see. There's some purple ones.
Oh,
so red is flame.
Red's my favorite.
Purple is just classic Harlequin. And then the blue is the inspirational.
Okay.
There's a lot of blue military ones too. So a lot of military inspirational.
Yeah, they've tried a lot of things. I remember when they did that NASCAR line.
So as much as we hate, they did. I forgot about that.
They've tried a lot of things.
As much as you and I hate on Harlequin, we do have to recognize that they did a lot of stuff for the industry.
And I don't hate them so much. I find them really funny.
Yeah.
They've got these ridiculous, over-the-top, dramatic,
cliche,
soap drama on heroin.
But then a lot of on heroin. But then 1972 happened. Kathleen Woodowis. I've heard it pronounced both Woodowis and Woodruss, so I'm not sure. But either way, she came out with this book, Flame in the Flower, in 1972, which, quote unquote, changed the romance industry forever. It was the start of the bodice ripper phase, which we've already described, and it really changed things. I'm gonna bring this up closer.
Paperback novel.
Yeah, it was the first, and
it was the first like modern. It revolutionized historical, and it started the bodice rippers, and it was the first in a lot of ways, and it was also the first book that I've ever hated with every fiber of my being reading.
This was a legit hate read. Like, just so much a hate read.
And I'm sorry to people that love it, but like as a 29-year-old in 2020,
there's issues with it. There's so many issues. But yeah, so 1972 happened, bodice rippers happened, and it really changed both how romance novels were perceived and how they were consumed. So because you had this very sexualized cover,
it's not even that sexy, really.
But
this
they would
particular
become.
one, yeah, that's fair. This is the 70s.
In the 80s,
and they get even more like.
In the 80s, Fabio happens.
Yeah.
And he has been on more romance covers than anybody else, pretty much. He was a romance cover model.
Somebody did try to break this trend in 2016, but
oh, that guy. That's right.
But it didn't really take off. Nobody cared. Like the industry had changed so much with covers.
Because cartoon covers
now became a thing.
Yeah.
Or like the half the bodies.
Yeah.
Were a thing for a while where you cut the head off.
Yeah. But so then the bodice ripper trend really kind of gained momentum, and as women started breaking the glass ceiling, romance novels themselves started really changing. Late 80s, early 90s, we still see a lot of the bodice rippers, so a lot of the historical, a lot of like questionable consent, dubcon. But then you start seeing more modern being published, and in the early 2000s, especially post 9/11, you start seeing modern romance just gaining favor, and people like Nora Roberts, Sherilyn Kenyon, Cole. What's her first name?
Kresley Cole?
Kresley Cole. Although she does a lot of paranormal.
Yeah, I don't know if I would put her in the category you're trying.
Lisa Kleypas, although she writes historical.
Yeah, she's okay. Or like Debbie McCumber.
Debbie McCumber, yeah. So a lot of
Danielle Steele to an effect, even though she borrows from some of the bodice ripper stuff.
This is true. But so the cat is back. Hi, Phoenix.
Kill it.
But post 2000, post 9/11, romance just takes off. But yeah, that's a not so brief history of the romance.
Yeah, it wasn't brief at all, but it was interesting.
Do you want to tell us about modern romance?
So yeah, modern romance is great.
What about the industry itself? I'm leading the witness, I know. But what can you tell us about the modern, like...
So for everybody that whines about it, romance is one of the best-selling fiction markets in the US and in the world. It's hard to find really recent numbers. I don't know why people stopped paying for this to collect this kind of data, but 2016, it accounted for 23% of total fiction sales. It is easily $1 billion industry no matter what year I look at it. There's some change in flow.
I think in 2018 is 1.08 billion was the amount.
But like they're making a lot of money off romance, and
a lot of it doesn't include ebook publishing either.
No,
because that's a recent phenomenon. Yeah,
so it's interesting to see how like the indies and the mainstream haven't quite figured out how to report their numbers together. Mm-hmm. But like ebooks have exploded, and romance has definitely benefited from that.
Yeah.
Something like.
So tell us about the readership.
All right.
Who reads romance?
I mean, this isn't too big of a surprise, but 82% are female, according to RWA. I know. But 18% of men are reading, which I'm very impressed by, and I am curious by, because we haven't had a male reader come to the club yet. The average age of the romance reader, according to RWA, is 35 years old to 39, which I'm kind of wondering how they found that. Ethnicity is still 73% white, 12% black, 7% Latino, and 4% Asian. Again, they did go into detail how they got these numbers, but I don't know, I feel like that's low.
But also, so the issue we have with any data is how many people don't report, and how many people are too ashamed to report.
Yeah, because there's still, we haven't just touched on that yet, but there's still a ton of shame attached to romance.
Oh, yes.
When I told one of my friends I was doing a romance book club, she's like, what, you'd read romance? And I realized I'd never actually talked to her about it. Oh. So yes, and then 86% are heterosexual or straight, 9% bi, pansexual or other, 2% gay and lesbian. And one survey showed that 45% of authors make enough to support themselves without a day job. And with digital publishing, there's a 17% that make $100,000 a year, which is really exciting. Again, that was from a survey that was conducted by a professor doing research, so it's probably not a broad view,
Yeah.
but it's still really exciting. I think
Yeah.
that they're able to get that much money. I don't see that happening for a lot of other genres, right? The bad
James
side,
Patterson.
though, yeah, well, James Patterson is like a brand at this point. I don't know how much he actually writes. However, so like one of the bad parts, though, of modern, of every 100 books published, only 8.3 have been written by people of color. It's
Yeah.
a very, very slight increase from 2018 when it was 7.7. And according to Ripped Bodice, who is a really famous romance
Ripped Bodice
bookstore,
is awesome.
they're awesome. Yeah, they were one of the first people, I think, to put this kind of research together. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know.
But they're an
But-
indie bookstore in
Mhm.
California.
Yeah, and they actually go around and they contact all of the major publishers, and they have a lot of data. It's a great PDF. If we can, we'll put it in the description so you guys can check it out.
And they have a really cute dog who's on their Instagram.
Yes, that's the
He's
most
one-eyed.
important part. But as soon as they started keeping track, so they've been keeping track 4 years, there's been a slight increase of 0.4%. It sucks. Don't clap for that.
But it's an increase, and
over
any
the-
gain is good.
Yeah, so this year, over 78% of the major romance publishing companies had less than 10% of their books written by people of color. And thanks to a recent Twitter campaign, we also know authors of color get significantly less money up front.
Yeah.
A number from 2014 puts that at 60% less in some cases. So we still have a lot of work to do. While romance is very heavily woman-led and run, the publishing industry itself is about 76% white.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you tend to run into a lot of the gatekeeping problems and the
Yeah.
problems we'll run into with like the RWA dumpster fire.
That's its own episode.
And a lot of some of the not even mini, but like mini and big controversies
Yeah.
that have happened.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done.
I will say though, even since most of that data was 2017, 2018.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know why I couldn't find a lot of 2019. I feel like
I feel like because
maybe we would have gathered that in 2020 and other things
And then-
happened.
yeah, a lot of stuff went down
There was a
between
lot going
Christmas 2019
Yeah.
with RWA and March 2020.
Yeah,
A lot of stuff happened
Happened.
culturally that I wouldn't be surprised if
They just kinda,
are
like,
just gonna
took a step back and
skip
thought about it for a
I
minute
know.
and
Yeah.
I think a lot of places are reevaluating and
Yeah.
looking over their policy.
We are now that we know kind of what romance is, I don't think anybody can really know what romance truly is.
We're trying our best.
We're trying to give you a nice square definition.
I mean,
It's
you
just
might
not.
already know if you're watching this. I hope
Yeah.
you're not, unless you're a casual observer and just want
I
to,
hope you're watching this.
you're just looking at us to see your cat. They want to know how many times your cat's gonna stick their tail in my face.
Exactly. Something about romance that has always bothered Jen and I, and what we really want to discuss now that we're like 40 minutes into this discussion.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun to cut later. Thank you.
Is why people say they hate romance. Because it is, I think, one of the most vilified genres
Yep.
in all of the publishing
Definitely, if
industry.
I went up to anybody else and was like, "Oh my God, I love sci-fi," or "I love James Patterson," or
Right.
James Bond, I don't get a second look.
Yeah.
But if I'm like, "Oh my God, did you read the new?"
Did you read the new Tessa Dare? Tessa Dare, if you're watching this, send us your art,
Oh my God, I love
please.
you.
We love you.
Well, that's another story when I
Yeah.
met her because I nearly died.
We will fangirl a lot too.
Oh my God, she's the best.
We warn
Oh,
you.
God.
But yeah, so genre shaming. Genre shaming
Mhm.
sucks. First off, stop it. Stop judging people. Genre shaming, a kind of definition of it. The name kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But genre shaming is basically somebody ridiculing somebody else for what they are reading
Mhm.
and or like to read. The reasons for this are kind of innumerable, and they basically just come down to that people suck.
That's a really good way to summarize it. But we do have some real specific points because, as you may have guessed, genre shaming has existed basically forever.
So I was reading this article when I was like researching the history of romance,
Mhm.
and they were talking about like I think it was like 16th or 17th century France,
Mhm.
and like there was some romantic literature going on, and there were people hating on those who read romantic literature.
Even back then,
Yeah, and then the
It's-
Victorians like were just all
Yeah.
over the place.
it's a constant like death and taxes. If you read romance, you'll
Yeah.
get made fun of.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's always the same argument, no matter what decade you look like.
What are those
Yeah.
arguments, Jen?
So one of the big ones I kept finding was it is dangerous for women. And it's funny because it's two different kinds of dangerous. It's either going to ruin our minds because it's going to make us lazy. It's going to keep us from doing our housework. It's going
I mean,
to...
that's accurate, so.
Well, that's fair. I'll give you that one. Yeah, my kitchen's a mess.
Yeah, no. Don't look under the couches.
It will weaken our minds. It'll weaken our bodies.
Will become addicted to sex.
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, it'll, what's a good word? I'm sorry. I had a good word in my head and now I'm dumb. See, that's what romance did to me. It made me stupid. So yeah, in one way, it'll weaken the female mind, and it'll also give the female mind very dangerous ideas about equality
And sex.
And what else we could be doing with our lives, right? Rather than cleaning my kitchen, I'm reading a book about how maybe I should be allowed to divorce my husband.
Scandalous.
Right? Or maybe I should be allowed to go out and work and do stuff.
What?
That one's specifically more 1600s. I'm not seeing that as often today.
Yeah.
Just thinking back to when the first novels came out in England, there was a lot of concern.
You were either a prostitute or you were a wife.
Yep.
That's pretty much.
Maybe a virgin if you got to be a nun.
Oh God. We don't even talk about virginity, but we're going to have to talk about
Eventually.
it. There's so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Anyways, but yeah, so.
But it's funny to me too when people say it's gonna make you weak and immoral and like just combine every single possible answer into one, I guess, really cool lady.
Yeah, yeah. So genre shaming, also, I mean, like the hypersexualized points.
Yeah.
That's like something they always come back to. They're like, but it's always about sex. It's just about sex.
And there can be a lot of sex in books. It very much depends on the book.
Yeah.
Like Amish, there's really not sex.
And then you can go all the way up to like erotica and 50 Shades of Grey.
And even I think a step above that is when you get into the dark romance that goes back to the bodice rippers, but with the dubious consent.
Yeah.
Or the rape or like the kidnapping or like the really dark themes of the anti-heroes. Like we've said a couple times, it's a really wide spectrum. It's not really fair, I think, to just paint it as this brush of, well, it's sex, so it's bad.
And just like there's such a broad spectrum, like you were saying, of romance. There's going to be a broad spectrum of sex. There's going to be a broad spectrum of the relationship. And if we harken back to, harken, that's a good word, back to the original definition of what makes a romance, it's about a relationship and relationship growth.
They have sex.
And sometimes they don't have sex,
And
which is
great.
totally fine. And now, especially with LGBTQ plus issues, there's a lot of asexual romances that have started coming out, which I
really cool.
love. I think that is so great, especially with YA.
Yeah.
Representation.
They've been really good.
Yeah, representation is important.
And I think too, just seeing certain aspects of it in literature is really important. I know for me, enthusiastic consent was never a weird concept.
Hi.
Because I remember a couple years ago when people were like, well, what does that mean?
It means
like,
yes.
Yes! And I feel like because I spent my life growing up reading it in these books, I was like,
well,
in some ways I felt more prepared for certain things.
Yeah.
Reading these, like, they were almost like a really safe place to explore. I guess the cat doesn't agree.
This cat doesn't know the meaning of enthusiastic consent. Just because we said yes, Phoenix, does not mean yes. No means no.
What's my point?
I don't know. Something about consent.
Yeah, and I think books end up always being a really safe way to explore feelings, no matter if they're positive feelings, negative feelings. I think when we get into Flower and the Flame, that explains some of the discussions around rape and why I think some women still really
Trigger warning. Sorry, trigger warning.
Just like that one's gonna be a heavy trigger warning because she gets raped like
a lot.
Oh, well, not a lot, but it's all before page 30.
One
so
time is a lot.
It's 3 times. It's like 3 times. Oh.
Moving on.
I don't know why I had to do it, guys. My point being, what is my point?
We're talking about genre shaming still.
I just got so distracted by the cat.
To be fair, it was like full frontal tail flex. So, oh, here's a good thing that people
Please,
say.
thank you. Yeah,
It's fluff. The word fluff.
Oh, whatever.
So what?
I don't care.
Sometimes I want to read fluff.
Yeah, sometimes I want fluff, and then I've read really difficult romances too, or
Oh my
romances that have
God.
really pushed barriers, or romances that have really made me think. It's just like any other thing.
All right, so genre shaming.
It was so bad.
The reason, like the points to sum them up, it's about sex.
Yeah.
It's dangerous for women. It's cliche, and it's fluff. How can we negate those points, Jen?
I think one thing that we can do is kind of what we're doing now when we talk and think critically about romance. I know there's some people that think it's stupid to dig into it.
We
But
get told that a lot.
yeah, like it's not that deep. Stop thinking
Stop
about it.
thinking so deep
They're,
into
like,
it.
All of this stuff was not intended by the author. You're seeing things.
So there's this really good meme that's out there.
Oh, about
it's the
curtain.
poem, The Curtain. So the
curtain.
line says, the curtain is blue. My English teacher, the curtain was blue with his feelings of despair and longing and depression. Author, the curtain is fucking blue.
It's just blue. It's the only thing.
Sorry.
But sometimes it is
Trigger.
a thing.
Bad
Sometimes
words.
it is a thing.
Yeah.
And
sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And I think that's the thing too with any book. If we see ourselves reflected in it, we're going to dig deeper into it. And romance is so good at reflecting
what's happening.
Almost, well, not almost everybody. It's getting better at reflecting almost everybody.
I think even if it doesn't reflect the people, it does a good job at reflecting the society. And that's what I mean by, like, let's dive deep into even the problematic stuff, into the stuff that's sexist and racist and transphobic, and was like, let's look at it. And it's okay if you still like some of this stuff. I know I struggle with that sometimes. If there's certain books that I remember really loving when I was getting into it, and I've read since, and I'm like, oh my god, what was I doing?
We had that recently.
With which one?
When we were reading The Highlander.
Oh yeah, I loved The Highlander.
That book.
And listening to all these other
Kiss or something.
Yeah, it was
it was the one with Degas.
It was Karen Marie Moning, who was amazing, by the way.
Love
she
her.
was another one I loved. And I probably reread this book. I must have reread that book.
I actually own it. That's how much I like
10 or 20 times. And for her and for all the people in the
book club
to point
see,
out,
like, this is terrible.
Just to be like, oh, I missed that. So I think that counts too. If you go back and you look at it and you don't hold it up as an example of look how amazing we are, but I think it's an opportunity to look at what we've done right and what we've done wrong, and just to look at us.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is a great example of the 70s and what was going on then, and our attitudes about sex and women then.
I feel like too, so many people will genre shame romance because they judge it on one specific type of book. They will judge it on Flame in the Flower. They will judge it on a bodice stripper. They will judge it on that hypersexualized cover. And this is such like an engendered thing. Like, if I go up to somebody that I don't know, and I'm like, hey, can you describe a romance novel for me? They will probably describe a bodice stripper almost like verbatim. And 1972 was 48 years ago.
Yeah, it's a long time. I wasn't born yet.
We weren't even twinkles in our parents' eyes yet.
I was. I have old parents.
It was so long ago, and for a genre, for anything to be judged on a standard that is almost 50 years old is inconceivable to me.
I would like those people to read an Alyssa Cole.
Yes.
I would like them to read a Tessa Dare.
Or the one that we're going to be reviewing later, Lisa K. Adams.
Yeah. One of the newer Nora Roberts, who her undercurrent. No, the shelter in place. Shelter in place, dealing with the aftermath of a mall shooting.
Or even Undercurrents, her newer one from last year deals with childhood abuse.
Yeah.
And the aftermath of that. So a lot of these modern authors take on really modern issues that are prevalent in our society today, in Western society. And again, I think if there's any genre that reflects society the best, it's going to be romance.
YA maybe, but
YA,
for a different
so angsty.
Yeah. Sorry, literary fiction readers out there, but you just give me a headache.
Listen, I cannot make it through a chapter of certain things without like crying. And most of the time I can finish books in like 4 hours. Yeah. But literary fiction, I can't finish a chapter in 4 hours. My brain does not work that way. Okay.
I feel like romance does the kind of thing that serious fiction wants to do, but I want to read romance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I feel like with a lot of if I'm going to read literary fiction, it's because I want to brag about it for some reason.
This is true.
Right? I want to
bragging rights.
Yeah.
Be like, I made it through Ulysses in 3 months.
That aspect? Oh, you still must not have understood it.
You know, we can do that with romance too, guys.
We can do justice of hiding their eyebrow.
Yes. But by treating romance, as you were saying, more critically and thinking about it, we can show that it doesn't exist in a vacuum, like these people who judge and genre shame think it does. So I think that's a good...
And I would like to say, I think it's also written by women. It's very much a women-centered business. It's marketed to women.
Yeah.
And not to get super raging feminist, I don't ever really put the raging feminists away, but not to like rant and rave too much.
We are raging romantics.
That's true. I think just any time a woman is doing anything, there's still that initial, like, it's not as good as what a man would do. Oh. And it's not as important as what a man would do. And I think even because they see it as like this weird woman fantasy, but But you know, we don't make fun of James Patterson or James Bond for being these weird male fantasies.
So
We had this whole thing.
basically, what we're trying to say is stop caring, stop judging,
Yeah.
stop shaming people for what they like to read. The world is a crapshoot as it is.
Yeah.
And if we need some escapism, if we need some happy endings, if we need some characters getting happy endings.
Speaking of that, actually, so what do you think about the criticism when people say this is going to give women too much of a romanticized version of relationships? That men aren't really like this, that they're going to be miserable in their own relationships because men can't meet these standards.
I'm saying some bad words in my head right now. That's my reaction. I say, go chop some wood in the woods. Go live up to your heteronormative, male-centered, toxic masculinity, and maybe sit down and read a Tessa Dare.
Okay.
And learn something. Did I make my point clear?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Cool.
That's all.
Maybe we should all raise our standards, all of us. Men and women.
Yes, we
And
should.
non-binary and
Yeah.
everybody.
What's wrong with having a fantasy? What's wrong with wanting something better? So I say that, but as long as it's not hurting anybody, what's wrong with having something
And
better?
I feel like there's a lot of people that think it teaches women to want marriage and kids.
Not necessarily.
But for me, I'm a lot happier being alone, knowing I'm not going to put up with a half-hearted
Right.
relationship. And like it just, because I've met women who are kind of
Meninists.
yeah, not just them, but like who don't seem super fulfilled and happy. But it feels like it's such a societal thing they have to stay. And like you really don't though.
We'll talk about that in the next
So,
episode.
Yeah, I don't know. So for me, I think it actually has encouraged me to have to not settle.
Yeah.
More so than anything. Like I'm good alone and I'm happy alone, and if that changes, great. If not, oh well.
Too bad. So sad.
I got too much student debt. I don't need a lot.
Yeah, wedding is expensive,
Yeah.
guys.
Why is it 29? It's like 29,000 for a wedding. Like 26, I think, is the average. That's insane to me.
That's
That's
so
what people
crazy.
should be complaining about.
Yeah.
That's a down payment on a
Capitalism.
house. Yeah, a lot of romance is down on capitalism.
Screw the patriarchy and capitalism. That's it, folks. That's the end of this.
We're gonna get canceled now.
Yeah. Our boss is
Never
gonna
see
yell
us
at
again.
us. All right, folks. So that was it.
Yes,
for
that was the
this
end of our first episode. Let us know how we did, and we will fix it for
Be
next time.
nice. Next time we are going to be doing a book review, so that's how the format of this is going to go. We are going to be focusing on a theme, topic, trope, something of the sort related to the romance genre of some sort. For the first episode of the month, the second episode of the month will be a book review.
Like a deeper dive.
Yeah, a deep
Which
dive.
I'm really sad about because I had to deep dive into
This flaming dumpster fire. But yeah, so if you like it, we'll see you next time. If not, I'm sorry, please be nice. But yeah, maybe try something new, try something different, and pick up a romance novel. Go to your local library if they're open. Check that they're open before
Yeah,
you
please
go.
call for an appointment. Don't knock at the door.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
wear your mask, wash your hands. There's your little public service announcement. So thanks, folks, and we'll see you next time.